With us in studio is Mr. Franklin Redhead, the Deputy Commissioner of Police. Good morning. Welcome to Daybreak.
Well, good morning for having me. Yes.
How are you doing this morning?
Well, not bad, considering all the weather we're having over the last 24 hours.
Right.
So you have your weather suit as well. I know police usually change into a different outfit.
No, it hasn't reached that stage yet. It's not complete.
Okay. Good.
Nice.
All right, so you're here to talk to us about the new strategic plan that the Royal Grenada Police Force has. So tell us about it.
Well, essentially, we have just launched our strategic plan, which caters for the years of 2012 to 2016. It's a rollover from the previous plan in terms of advancing the agendas of the RGPF, in terms of modernizing the structures, and better trying to address the issues that confront law enforcement within Grenada. Essentially, the plan is framed around 6 broad strategic themes. I think Team 1 has to do with addressing issues of the street in terms of noise and antisocial behavior and crime itself. The second team addresses the issues of traffic management. And of course, you would know that traffic management has 3 major components, which is infrastructure, education, and enforcement. Of course, the enforcement part of it falls right within our remit. And so we are trying to address that in a more proactive way to ensure that we address the concerns that are arising out of the current traffic situations. The third team has to do with addressing the issue of psychotropic substances, which is drugs, and suppressing that, and how we can better ensure that we address those concerns in a very real way, because of the fact that there are many spin-offs from drug trafficking, and one of those spin-offs has to do with spiraling crime and antisocial conduct within the society. The other theme has to do with amplifying and expanding the whole concept of community policing, which we see as central to our efforts and in terms of our success, and how we can address those issues that confront us in terms of traffic management, in terms of crime management, by having a more proactive, community-oriented policing program that addresses the real needs and concerns of people throughout the communities. The other themes has to do with suppressing corruption within the organization, which is a new agenda that we recently embarked on, because of the fact that if you're going to enforce crime, then the agents of enforcement have to be above board. So you can't be a contradiction. So that particular pillar is aimed to address that particular concern of suppressing corruption, and essentially it involves the whole issue of polygraphing people, members of the force, random polygraphing, also random drug testing to ensure that they stay on the path. So essentially that is the strategic theme within which the plan is framed. There are other supporting factors in terms of improving human resource management, improving our logistics and financing, and how we can better link those things together to ensure that we have the desired output that is required for the management of the RGPF, and ultimately addressing the concerns of Grenada across the board.
You see, the main difference, as you highlighted, between this plan and previous plans is the anti-corruption.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily the main difference. There are some subtle differences in terms of the individual objectives and results that we expect within the various pillars. But we have added this 6th pillar, which addresses anti-corruption in a very direct way.
Okay, would you like to highlight some of the other differences?
Well, some of the other differences has to do with addressing concerns that emanates within the divisions and districts, which are very specific to communities in Guelph, in Grenville, in St. George's, and so forth. One of the issues has to do with addressing the issue of noise and noise complaints. So we have a more proactive stance relative to how we can better address those issues.
Sounds good. I would just like to zoom in on the suppression of corruption just for a little bit. What is the extent of corruption that probably happens within the police force? If it's okay for you to highlight that for us.
Well, I think the extent of corruption within the institution really mirrors the extent to which corruption obtains within the general society. Because you recognize the fact that institutions are a microcosm of the wider society. So you expect that if there is levels of corruption in the society, there will be levels of corruption within the organization. I think that is the reason why we have created a greater focus on these issues, because often you hear complaints, some that are substantiated, some that are unsubstantiated about the conduct of officers. And so it speaks to the issue of addressing those issues in a very real way to ensure that we suppress it. I don't think we can ever get rid of it, but I think it can be suppressed to a fairly significant degree.
Right.
So, why is it that y'all decided to introduce this into the plan at this point in time? Is it a proactive measure, or is it something reacting to?
It is a proactive measure, and it is also reacting to concerns and comments that people have over the time. Often you hear people mention the conduct of officers, issues in terms of the way they themselves behave. And like I said before, if you're an enforcement agent, you can't be a contradiction. You must also enforce the law, but you also have to adhere to the law.
Right.
So that is one of those mechanisms that are geared towards ensuring that people stay on the narrow path.
Okay.
Now, I noticed you also highlighted that one of the parts of the strategic plan focuses on drugs and the traffic of drugs and that sort of thing. What is the drug situation like in Grenada right now? Is it getting worse? Is it stagnant? Is it improving?
Well, the drug situation, it shifts from what I will call from the cocaine to the marijuana over the years. What we are seeing now is an explosion of use of marijuana and the availability of marijuana in the street. That doesn't mean that cocaine is still available, still not available. But the fact of the matter is that the drug will be here with us because of the fact that in the context of the current economic depression that the country is going through, people are looking for alternatives to survive. That is a hard reality. So it presents a dichotomy, if you will, that yes, we want to adhere to laws, but we also have to survive. And people are looking for these avenues. It isn't the right thing to do. We're not encouraging it, but that is the reality, and we have to speak to the reality and address those realities. But we are ensuring that we put in place the mechanisms, both locally and both collaboratively across the region, to ensure that these activities are suppressed. There's very good collaboration among the Caribbean counterparts as well as the US and South American counterparts relative to how we can better address those issues. Yes.
I noticed that you said there's normally a shift between marijuana and cocaine. What causes that shift, if you can
I
tell
couldn't
me?
say, because I don't have the data with me or the analysis with me. People within our drug squad will be better able to frame a response to that. But that is usually the pattern over the years from the time I've been in the organization.
Okay, and that's our two main things. We don't really go
yes.
venture outside of that too much.
Generally, generally. In a sense.
No, I noticed I saw in the media recently that police were receiving training on certain different things. Can you just tell us exactly what police have been?
Well, training is a process that goes on continually within the RGPF. From the time you enter the organization, you have to go through basic training, and then there's specialization training that will create experts within various disciplines. I think recently we concluded training on domestic violence and how we can better address issues that emanate from those crime types. Because if you look at the crime statistics, you'll see an upsurge in violence against women, particularly rapes, indecent assault, and those other things. As well as the state has recently passed a new domestic violence bill, and there are certain obligations that are placed under RGPF, which we now have to take on board in our daily remit. So the training that was recently concluded is geared towards making more robust our approaches to domestic violence, particularly as it impacts women and children, and how we can better address the obligations under the new act.
Sounds good.
All right, so this plan is supposed to be covering 2012 to 2016.
Yeah, and it's not cast in stone. The situation is so dynamic that it could change next year in terms of the broad components, but it is really our strategic intention to address those issues across the board. Of course, that is driven by the circumstances. Should the circumstances change, and obviously we have to change to reflect those circumstances as we move forward.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds good.
Well, let's take it to, say, for instance, something is happening within someone's community, say, for instance, domestic violence. Persons can easily call 911,
Yes.
and the response would be as quick as possible.
Well, we tell people so, and we want to address those issues of response. Oftentimes, for some reason or the other, it doesn't happen, but still, again, we are trying to improve the system in terms of response, in terms of feedback, but we generally encourage persons to call into 911 to make those complaints and comments.
And given that, you just said there's a training that happened recently, what can persons do in the meantime before the police arrives to a situation?
Well, I think some people there tends to be persons that you trust who can intervene in the interim. But we would not encourage persons, particularly in violent situations, to make any interventions because of the fact that you're jeopardizing your own well-being and life.
Right.
But certainly we want to encourage persons who are cognizant that these situations are happening to come forward and report it. Because of the fact that if it's not reported, then it can't be addressed in the appropriate way. So we are encouraging high levels of reporting to ensure that we can suppress that particular crime type more effectively.
All right.
What about the issue of confidentiality, though? You know, some persons are reluctant to report things because they're worried that, my uncle is so and so in the police, so he might find out and that sort of thing.
Well, that is a real concern. I mean, because of the fact that we are such a small society and everybody knows everybody. But again, the professionalism of the institution has to be primary here in terms of the way things unfold. It seems that gossip is now in the national pastime. Everybody talks about every issue. But as we move forward, we are encouraging and we are showing the public that we will anticipate higher levels of confidentiality from the organization. Because again, if we don't be confidential in the way that we handle matters, it will jeopardize our whole notion of community-oriented policing. Because we want information from the general public. We need to know what is happening out there. And the only way we can do that is to encourage persons to come forward. And at the same way, how we handle that information is critical to the success that we desire.
Okay. Now, this plan is being implemented immediately.
It is implemented.
Over what time frame do you expect to see the results of the plan?
Well, we anticipate results. We'll have our annual reviews, which the divisional commanders and department heads will come in to address issues that fall directly within their remit. Every strategic pillar within the plan does not address every different department or division, but there are opportunities for everyone to address those issues in terms of ensuring that we sing from the same sheet of music, so to speak, so that there's a strategic focus for the organization, and every department or division does not do their own thing, but it resonates with a central strategy, and that is the key principle.
All right.
Yes.
Just tell us how it is like for you being the Deputy Commissioner of Police. What is your job like?
Well, it can get quite hectic and busy sometimes. Other times, when we have lighter moments, it is somewhat more relaxed, but it's something that can be quite busy and challenging at times. Yes.
Well, we have great respect for you, and thank you so much for coming on the show this morning. And we hope that the strategic plan is, of course, a great success.
Well, thank you for having me, and all the best to you guys. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. This has been Deputy Commissioner Francis Redhead talking to us about the new strategic plan of the Royal Grenada Police Force, covering 2012 to 2016, of course, with a little room to change if need be. All right.